coming up on episode 40 of the Create If Writing podcast.
I think it's so important to really kind of reframe marketing, as sort of, a way to really share your work with the world.
I can't go back to sleep, it's almost like...
When I started out in this business, platforms weren't a thing. Now, the barriers are down, and I think that's a wonderful thing for people.
One by one, the stars are disappearing from the horizon.
Hello and welcome to Create If Writing, the podcast for writers and bloggers wanting to build authentic platform without feeling smarmy. I'm your host, Kirsten Oliphant, and I'm so glad that you're listening today. Last week, I gave a brief recap of the Smarter Artist Summit, which was an indie writer conference that was really fantastic, put on the guys from Sterling & Stone, who do the self-publishing podcast and I think like a dozen other podcasts. But it was really fantastic to get to be in a space that was super exciting, full of indie writers who are publishing their own works on Amazon and Kobo and lots of other places and actually making a decent living doing it. And the week before that, I talked to Joanna Penn, who was actually at the Smarter Artist Summit as a speaker. And so I've done a lot of indie kind of interviews in the last, month, I guess, the last couple of weeks. But today I'm actually chatting with Maria Ribas, who is a literary agent at Stonesong. And it's really fun to talk with her. I think we connected through Pinterest of all places, which I never connect with anybody on Pinterest. I just kind of go and bin stuff and leave. But somehow we connected on Pinterest, and she has a really neat blog, Cooks and Books, which is actually at cooksplusbooks.com. And I'll leave the link in the show notes, which is going to be at createifwriting.com/040 for episode 40. But in this interview, Maria and I talk all about what it takes to actually get a book deal, because things have changed a lot in the last 10 years, and she deals primarily with nonfiction, and she does a lot of blogger book deals. And I know I've got some bloggers in the audience, and I feel like it's that kind of dream, not for every blogger, but a lot of bloggers dream of getting a book deal. So we talk about what it actually takes to get that, whether you're a blogger or not, but what it does take as a blogger to move into the space of traditional publishing. And I don't know where you guys are at in terms of thinking about publishing. And I'd love it if you head over and leave a comment in the show notes. But I feel like I'm always the person standing in sort of the gap between two different groups and bridging that gap. For example, writers and bloggers, that's not always, those are two different circles that sometimes overlap. And I'm in the overlap for sure. And when it comes to publishing, for traditional publishing and for indie publishing, I'm right in that gap as well, because I still would love to get a book deal, specifically for my fiction. But I already have done some independent publishing, and I actually have a new book that will be coming out this week, Email Lists Made Easy for Writers and Bloggers. And I'll leave the link to where you can pre-order your copy. So I've definitely done indie publishing. I definitely will continue to do indie publishing, but would also still really like a traditional deal, which I think is kind of weird in this space, because people tend to not want both. You kind of want one or the other, but yeah, that's where I am at. So, and maybe that will change, because I definitely didn't think that I would be an indie writer or really in that space at all, because typically people who come out of an MFA program, which is the Master of Fine Arts in Fiction, you're not an indie typically. And typically you're not a big blockbuster seller either. You're kind of like the smaller literary publishing houses that are imprints of the bigger 5 traditional guys. So that's where normally people like me would fall. But I don't. I like everything. I like that there is hope, and then there are possibilities for writers today and for bloggers who want to publish books. I know tons of bloggers who have sold just a PDF book on their site and made a lot of money doing that. So we're just in a space where you can actually do a whole lot of things on your own. You can get a book deal still. Although it's harder, you might make less money actually with a book deal, which is the interesting thing now about being an indie. But there's just a lot of possibilities. So whatever your choice is and your preference is, I feel like we're at that time where you can kind of go and do it. So I'm really excited to bring you this interview. I hope it's really encouraging for you, and I'll see you on the flip side. On today's episode, I am talking with Maria Ribas from Cooks and Books. And I'm really excited to have Maria, because not only does she have a fabulous blog, but she is a literary agent. Truly legit, you guys. So she is going to talk to us today about a lot of things. I have a lot of questions for Maria. So welcome to the Creative Writing Show, Maria.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. It's so nice to be on here and to be talking to you. And I'm excited for the questions you have. They're such interesting ones.
Well, I really, a lot of people who are kind of, familiar with publishing know about literary agents, but I still talk to writers who actually don't fully know the process. Like they're working on books or they're bloggers wanting to write books, but they don't know how this works. So I'd love to hear how you got to be a literary agent at Stonesong and kind of about just sort of the journey that brought you to where you are today.
Sure. So to give you kind of the quick 101 on what literary agents are, because I get that question often too. So we kind of serve to connect authors to book deals with book publishers. So we work within the traditional publishing process. And what we do is we kind of represent our authors, we coach them, we guide them throughout the process. We make sure they get the best deal. We make sure they end up with the best publisher, the best editor, all of that. So we really do essentially one-on-one career coaching for our authors. So I actually have a little bit different of a background because I started out on the other side of the table as an editor. So I was at a few publishers in New York and then in Boston acquiring books, doing a lot of nonfiction, working with authors on that side. But I sort of, through that, realized that I loved working with authors more so than, necessarily sitting down and editing a full manuscript. And that I really wanted to be on the author's side over, necessarily on the publishing side, which is when I made the switch to agenting. I was at a smaller agency for a little while and then moved to Stonesong, which is one of the larger agencies in New York.
That's so exciting. I love, there's a part of me, I never will be there, but there's a part of me that sort of like dreams of like the literary New York life. But
well, I split my time now between DC and New York. So
wonderful. Okay. I grew up in Virginia, so DC was just sort of a hop and skip away. But
yes. I'm in Arlington.
Excellent. Okay. I have friends there as well. So small world, but,
yes.
Talk us through what a typical day looks like because, like my fantasies of like the New York literary life is probably not at all what it looks like. So why don't you walk us through your typical day?
I will tell you, it's not nearly as glamorous as it sounds. So we do just a lot of kind of liaison work, honestly, which I sort of hate that word, but that truly is what it is. So it's a lot of working with authors and editors. A lot of it is editing proposals, is getting on the phone with authors and talking them through their concepts, thinking about the market, helping them make even better proposals. A lot of the times, I'll help them with their platforms as well. So, if they're struggling to build their email list or if they need to change something in terms of their website or, there's something that we could really optimize, I help talk them through that because we're lucky that we see a lot of the back end of what a lot of the biggest bloggers out there are doing. So we have a lot of kind of the knowledge that goes around in there about, best practices for building a platform. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of email answering. We do go on a lot of lunches with editors, which is wonderful because it's really, a great way to learn about someone else's list and what editors are looking for. And a huge part of it too is monitoring the publishing market. You have to know what's out there and you have to know what's already being done and you have to know what editors are looking for and what's being sold. So we read, tons of industry news. We have to really kind of keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening in the book marketplace.
Wonderful. I want to get maybe some recommendations either now or at the end, and I'll leave them in the show notes, but I'd love some recommendations for some of the things that you guys are reading, like if they're public email lists that we could join to kind of keep up with that.
Absolutely. There's so many great ones out there these days.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'll get you to send me a list and I'll put those in the show notes. So this is like, I'm going to just throw this at you. This is a curveball because I didn't tell you about this question ahead of time. But
That's okay.
As you were talking, because I know you're a blogger, I know you've worked with bloggers, but like if we have bloggers listening who are like, I want a book deal and that's one of their big goals, like do you have advice about sort of the best ways to make that happen or what it takes to actually go from a blog to a book deal?
Absolutely. And that's something I do a lot of too, is talking to potential clients, especially bloggers, and getting a sense of where they are and then giving them a sense of whether I think they're ready for a book. So what publishers look for in terms of bloggers is they want to know that you have a really engaged readership that you can already bring into the process. So what that means is, they're looking for some sort of quantification that when the book comes out, 2 years down the line, that they'll be able to sell a significant number of copies. So a lot of the stats in the blogging world that people look for, it's traffic, it's social media followers. So Facebook is big. Pinterest is big, a lot of the standard ones. For me, I've been looking a lot more closely for email list. As we all know, that's so important for being able to constantly speak to people, especially when algorithms are changing on social media platforms.
Yes.
So I tell all of my blogging authors, first thing, if you don't have an email list, you must start it right away, because you really want to be able to get in contact with them and guarantee that you can get in front of those people when your book comes out and you want them to go buy the book.
Awesome. And you know that I appreciate that, being an email list nerd. So
I know.
Awesome. Perfect.
And you'd be surprised how many people just aren't doing it yet, honestly. A lot of even legacy bloggers we work with are just starting to build that.
I've talked with a couple of writers that I know who have like multiple books, like fiction and nonfiction. And, I do some consulting and some coaching and kind of brand audit stuff. And I was like, hey, how can I help you? Like, what can I help you do with your email list? And like, oh, I don't have an email list. And I'm like, what? Oh my God.
I hear that all the time.
So, but a lot of them, started back, the world has changed a lot. I mean, even since I graduated, I got my MFA in 2007, and it has changed dramatically. Like when I was dealing with an agent and, publishers, nobody even asked. Like, they didn't ask. They were like, do you have a platform? I was like, I kind of have a blog. And they're like, oh yeah, whatever. Like they just didn't, that was not even a thing. So
absolutely.
I think some of the authors who started writing and publishing books before this are kind of like, well, why fix, what's working? But I feel like it would work so much better. And I keep wanting to be the person that like, no, you have no idea what you could achieve. So
thank you. That's exactly what I always want to say, because so many people will say, but well, look at all these successful people who don't have any of that. And it's like, but you don't know how much more they could be doing and how much more fulfilling their work would be if they did have a way to talk to their readers all the time. Being a writer and being a blogger, it's lonely. It's really kind of connecting with your audience and having a way to talk to them and turn that into a dialogue that I think is what makes any creative work rewarding.
I agree. And I think, with the rise of indie publishing being, like a legit thing, like again, 2007, I was like, people are always like, oh, you should self-publish if you can't get published. I'm like, that's vanity. Like, no, I'm not doing that. But it's not that way anymore. And there are people making viable incomes, large incomes, utilizing these free tools that it sounds like you're telling your authors to get and utilize. And I'm like, you can't keep doing that same thing forever and expect it to work if you have all these people who are using the free tools who are growing and growing. Like at some point, I don't know. I don't want to make predictions about the world, but I do think, there are a lot of people using this and finding success. So if you're already finding success, why not use these other free, it seems like a no-brainer to me, but also, I'm not in the world where I already have stuff published where I started, before that time. So I might be a little more set in my ways if I weren't so nerdy about social media and blogging. But
right. Yeah. And that's really, I think that's something that is so important for writers and writers and bloggers is bloggers really know that you have to constantly be innovating. There's always going to be another blog doing something cool and new, whether it's now Facebook videos, those quick little 30-second clips that are so popular now, or it's Snapchat, or it's whatever. And I think sometimes traditional fiction writers tend not to innovate as much in the same ways in terms of technology. But that's something that we on the publishing side have to do so much. When I started out in this business, platforms weren't a thing. We did one of the first blog to book books out there, and it was like, oh, we're doing one blog to book now, we don't want another one on the list, that was it. And now it's everyone, all of our authors essentially have blogs or some other way of communicating with their audience. So it's just, it's changed massively.
Yeah. And I think that's really cool, but I'm a person who likes platforms. So I do understand the people who don't, but that's kind of what I hope my whole blog insight is about is, let's reframe it. If you're not excited about it, let's get excited about it, because it's so neat that we can connect with your readers. Like, you just couldn't do that in the same way as before. So I feel like it's an opportunity, but I won't go on about my personal passion about
No,
this.
I agree with you. You're preaching to the choir.
Well, what are some of the mistakes then that you see, bloggers or authors making with platform?
That actually perfectly ties into what you were just saying, that I think that the biggest mistake people have is that they're not looking at it from the right perspective. And what I try to do in my work on the blog, aside from my literary agenting, is help people really reframe what platform building is and what marketing is. So I often sometimes work with authors who, or I hear often from authors that they don't really like the idea of marketing because they don't want to promote themselves and they think self-promotion is sort of, icky, which I completely understand. Self-promotion, shameless self-promotion is icky. But I think that the opportunity that's being missed is that, I know that the majority of those people have something really, really interesting to say, and they have something that other people want to hear, and they can help those people if they knew how to reach them. And that's really what marketing is it's finding a way to talk to the people who you could help and be in dialogue with them and learn from them as much as you're trying to help them learn from you and as much as you're trying to educate them. So, I try to help a lot of the people who feel a little bit uncomfortable with the idea of marketing, help them see it really more as, kind of outreach and education, and a way to help others, which I think so many people feel drawn to that purpose in life is how can they help someone, especially in the nonfiction realm I work in. But they don't feel comfortable with the idea of marketing per se. And the same thing kind of with platform building. They just say, oh, I'm very introverted or I'm naturally shy. I hear that a lot. I think that books and writing tend to draw introverted personalities. I am introverted myself. Most of our massive authors are, we have hugely successful authors who are very, very private people, but yet they find a way on their blog to, connect with their readers and talk to them and open up in that way. And I think it's so important to really kind of reframe marketing, as sort of, a way to really share your work with the world rather than to, spam or self-promote people. That's not what authentic marketing is about at all.
Absolutely. And I think probably one of the reasons, I think the introverted thing is spot on because I do hear that a lot from people. And I'm an introvert, but I would say like almost an extreme introvert because it takes me so many hours to like recover from actually spending time with people, which is why like I don't sleep
I need
very
my
much.
alone time.
Yeah, because I'm like, okay, I spent 12 hours with people today, so that means I need to be awake for 12 hours by myself not talking to somebody. And that's not reality. But it is something crazy like that. But I'm also really outgoing. Like I'm not shy. Although I can be in certain situations, like there are certain places I'll just hang back and not talk. But other times I can happily just walk up and, and talking to people on a podcast you don't know. You have to have a certain level.
Right.
But the other thing, I think people just really feel like it's like what you said about it just being like icky self-promotion. We get all those icky emails. We see all those icky Facebook
and
posts.
They're awful and we hate them. Nobody likes that.
Yes. And so I think that's where this idea comes from is that you think that it's sort of like you have to be your own used car salesman for your stuff.
Yeah.
And that's not
and you're the used car.
Yeah. Like buy this, beater up book here. And no. So I think that, there are all these myths and we've seen people do it so poorly that we fear, and we know how we feel, right? We know how we feel when we have that. And so we don't want to do that to other people. And then, the whole process just stops. So I love that idea of reframing. I feel like you and I are very much like, connected in this way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, what are some of like the best pieces of advice or things that people can be doing if in the long run they know that they want to be traditionally published? Like what things can they be doing now and kind of as they're writing or just kind of on that journey?
That also ties in exactly to what we're saying, where the best piece of advice I could give to anyone now is just get out there, get out there, meet people, talk to people, whether it's online, whether it's in real life. Just the sooner you can kind of overcome that hesitancy to talk about your work and to share it with others, the sooner you'll sort of get past the blocks that I think really prevent people from building platforms and from getting their books out there. Because I've seen, authors who aren't really sort of mentally and emotionally there yet when their book comes out. And it's really, really difficult because they lie awake at night and they are panicked because this precious book that they spend so much time on, and that I know how much blood, sweat, and tears went into it, it's out there in the world, and they're almost secretly terrified that someone will find it and read it. They're not still fully comfortable with the idea that, their writing exists to help other people, and that means that other people need to be able to find it. So it's just, the sooner people can kind of work through that, the better. And I also do think that the sooner people can sort of get comfortable connecting with other people, the better too. And that goes for fiction or nonfiction, because, we always say you don't need a platform to get a fiction book deal, but you will eventually need to have those skills in place in order to promote the book and succeed long-term as an author, because you'll have to go to book signings, you'll have speaking engagements, you'll be brought into circles where you'll need to network or talk to people or talk to editors. And if that sounds like your personal nightmare, then maybe that's really an area where you need practice in. And the biggest thing I tell people about that is it's a practice. You'll need to give yourself several years of time to get more and more comfortable with that. Take a public speaking class, start writing online. It takes time to sort of gradually get comfortable with this idea. I don't think it comes naturally to anyone, and especially not to natural introverts. It feels very, very uncomfortable at first. So kind of the sooner you can get started on, that personal development, I think is the sooner you can really kind of work to your full potential and get your book and your work out there to its full potential.
I love that, because I feel like I know several people in the last couple of months, and we were talking about, platform stuff, because that's just what nerds like me talk about. And
me too.
Yeah, they were saying like, oh, well, when I have, my book's coming out in, X months, and I'll start using Twitter then. And I'm like, no,
I know.
Because you are going to be, there's so many reasons that's a bad idea. But like, one, you've got several stressful things at once. You've got your book coming out, which is exciting, but also a lot of work. So like, why would you start an email list then, or start a new social media platform you're not excited about then, when you also have a book coming out, and also all the things that you could be doing? Like, I feel like people could do it along the way, and then when the time comes, it's so much easier, because you are, like you said, you're comfortable with it. You've had that practice. Yeah. And also you do have something to show. And I want to ask a follow-up about that. So for fiction and nonfiction, like what might be, I know you probably can't speak to like exact numbers or anything, but like what is the difference then if you are trying to get a fiction book published versus a nonfiction book in terms of platform?
It varies a little bit by, who you're talking to. Industry professionals really sort of disagree on whether you need a platform for fiction. Most say that you don't. And that is true. You do not need a platform to get a book deal right away. There are plenty of people who right out of the MFA program with, they don't even exist to Google. They don't have any, any social media accounts out there, can get book deals. But I think the differentiation is that you will eventually need a way to tell people about your book. So, you sort of can't avoid that aspect of things forever. On the nonfiction side, you must have a platform. It's very, very different. And, it is very, very competitive in terms of that, especially kind of in the food blog to book area. But it really kind of varies by category and by other things that you're doing. Platform doesn't necessarily need to be only online. I think that online is a crucial place where every creative should be. But, a lot of our authors also, they're doing speaking engagements, or, they have a magazine, or they are teaching tons of classes and workshops, or whatever it is. It's really about having that ability to reach people.
That's great. Well, I think that's good to know also that, it is really different. So if depending on what you're writing, it is a totally different kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to talk a little bit about your blog, which I love. So it's Cooks and Books, and which is actually cooksplusbooks.com. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Those pesky domain names,
I know. It's
my old blog.
One day I'll buy the other one.
I know. My old blog had a different name because I think actually this is like just free tip for people. Like if you, first of all, buy your domain name of your name, just buy it, even if you're not doing anything.
I'm writing this down. This is a good tip for me.
No, really, get it. But also don't search for it to see if it's available and then buy it the next day, because I really do think that some of these sites kind of track what people look up and then they buy it. So you have to buy it from them, because when my old blog was I Still Hate Pickles, and it was a Blogger, so Blogspot back in the day. And I was trying to decide if I wanted to just be a .com. And so I went and looked up istillhatepickles.com, and it was free. And I was like, well, let me think about it. The next day I went to buy it and it was gone. And I know nobody else was like searching for this term. Yeah. So I ended up with stillhatepickles.com, which, is fine. It just didn't have the I. But then my email was I still hate. It annoyed me. Like that little I just drove me nuts. And so once somebody gets a hold of, a domain name, it can be obnoxious. So anyway, that's a side note. Your blog is awesome. So why don't we talk a little bit about like kind of how you got started blogging and sort of what the purposes are behind your blog?
Sure. So the blog really got started in that, unfortunately, I hate that this is true, but a lot of my work is, not necessarily being able to work with authors one-on-one. And sometimes it's sending out rejections, or sometimes, it's having to pass on the opportunity to work with certain authors. And 99% of the time it was because they didn't have a strong enough platform. Because really that is a sort of thing that takes years and years to build. And that really needs to be driven by the author. So that's not something, if an author comes to me and has a fabulous platform, but their book concept isn't quite right for the market, I can help them with that. That's a lot of what we do, is shaping book concepts for the market. But with a platform, that really is kind of needs to be in place before the author begins the traditional book publishing process. And I was just, it's sort of frustrating because there's so many people out there who have so many interesting things to say. And, I wanted their books and I wanted to work with them, but they just weren't there yet. And I knew that if I took that book or that author to an editor at a publisher, that they would say, I love it, their platform isn't big enough yet. And the same thing happens to the editor when they take it to their sales team internally. The sales team says, sorry, the platform isn't there yet. So the blog really just got started as a way to kind of help the people that I wasn't able to work with one-on-one, to explain a lot of the stuff that, we're looking for, that editors are looking for, share a lot of the advice that I give my blogging authors, pass along a lot of the insight that I see is what's working for bloggers and the insight that's working for other writers. So it's really kind of meant to be a catch-all for, a lot of the questions I often get from people, and sort of a way to, start a conversation about, the way that the online world has really changed how we can reach people and how we can publish books. Because I find that fascinating too, and I nerd out about it as much as you do.
Yes, we're like a little, I don't know, I can't think of any good expression, but yes, we very much align in that way.
I know. It's cool. It's fascinating. I mean, we live in like a wonderful age where you could do this. 10 years ago, if you wanted to publish a book, it was just, luck or happenstance, or, there were traditional platform things, but you sort of needed more of an entryway to get into there. And now, the barriers are down, and I think that's a wonderful thing for people.
Yeah, you sort of had to be like, if you had a platform, it was because you were like a celebrity, and that just wasn't possible. But now you can become a celebrity on YouTube, like, or Instagram or somewhere else. Like there are all these different platforms with their own, own celebrities. And I think I was reading, this is so funny. I went to the doctor and I had to wait. And so I picked up a copy of 17 magazine, and I was like, I have not read this since, I don't know. I read it before I was 17. I think by the time I was 17, I had graduated. But I was like, yeah. What are the teenagers doing now? I felt really old. But it was really interesting how social media had impacted even the magazine. So the models now in the magazine all have, on each page, they tell the model's name and where you can find that model on Instagram or Twitter.
Really? That's fabulous. I love that.
That is so, I'm sure everybody wishes they had that back in the day. Of course we didn't have those platforms, but, and then they also were, they had some interviews with some people who became like, very successful on platforms like Vine, which I do not use at all. I understand what it is, but that's not my thing. But a girl who was like 16 and she was bullied in high school and then started a Vine and became one of the most popular Viners, I guess, and is now, like 18 and makes a full-time income on Vine.
Wow.
And it's like, I just find this really exciting that it's just weird, and we could not have imagined it, even 10 years ago, even 5 or 6. I mean, I feel like some of the things that are happening now, it's like, that's a thing.
I know. Yeah. And it's so cool because you get so much more diversity. Think of the 16-year-old girl you just mentioned who was being bullied. Like 10 years ago, she couldn't have, told her story, but now with all that you can do online, anyone can tell their story. And I think that's infinitely invaluable to people.
Yeah, it definitely is. Well, I always in my interviews asking people what is inspiring them this week, whether that's high art, low art, doesn't matter. I just like to hear what is inspiring you. So Maria, what is inspiring you this week?
It was when I saw that question, I was sort of stumped, and it made me realize that I'm really sort of starved for inspiration the last few weeks. I've been so focused on kind of being efficient over, and getting so much done. It's been a busy few weeks that I feel like I haven't really, explored new music or picked up a new book or, watched a new TV show or anything. And that sort of kind of made me realize, I need suggestions for interesting, cool stuff that's out there. So I don't know if people, in the comments when you post this could leave, ideas of what they're enjoying listening to, what they're enjoying reading, what they're watching. I really sort of need a jolt of inspiration in my life.
Yeah, I definitely have weeks like that, like weeks where I'm like, when is the last time I even read a book?
I know.
Like, when was the last time I read anything that was not on my computer or phone?
Right, exactly.
And it's been a while. So, this would be a good question too for the community, which you can find on Facebook. I've got a pretty active, really awesome little Facebook group. And you can find it just createifwriting.com/community. And I think you're already in there. Are you in there?
Yeah, I believe so.
I thought so, but maybe I'll just start this as a thread to kind of see, because I always ask my guests, but I don't always ask the people I talk to every day, in the Facebook group. But yeah, I feel like I'm so busy right now. I don't have time for inspiration, but I get really inspired by my own, just the things I'm doing get me kind of fired up. And so I think, but I totally know what you mean. Like, I don't listen to music. That's one thing I really don't like about this, total side note about sort of how things have changed in this digital world. The way I used to listen to music has changed because music has changed in the way that it's accessible. And I never recovered. Like, I used to get CDs and listen to that CD. Like, I'd get one CD and I would listen to that CD for like a month. I knew all the names of the songs. I knew all the words. I knew everything. Like, I'd read the album cover or the CD jacket, I guess. So now that everything's digital, it's like I don't know. Like, I know how you get music. It's not that I don't understand. But I think the method of listening really negatively impacted how I listen to music. So that's a total side note. But
yeah, no, that's totally true. I mean, I just find I listen to the same Pandora stations with the same songs over and over.
Yeah.
And I want to discover something new. Algorithms can't do all the discoverability for us.
No, definitely not. Well, noisetrade.com is a great place if you haven't been, where you can
I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, it's fabulous. They actually have books too that you can put up as a writer, but everything is free. And the way that people get the authors and artists put the music or books up, and you can get it in exchange for an email address and a zip code. So it helps artists and writers kind of find where their audience is located and, get in contact with them. But they have some really great music up there. So
really,
yeah,
that's
and
awesome.
It's free.
I love it. I'm going to try it out.
Yeah, go check it out. I saw one that got an email from them today from somebody I really want is on there. So I was like, must go get it because it doesn't always stay forever. So you have to get them while they're there.
Oh, okay. So it's kind of like pop-up type of thing?
Well, some of them stay for a long time, but then some of the artists I think do it, especially, some of the musicians, like if they're not just getting started, but they're, established, but they want to use Noise Trade too, they will give like a sampler and then, it doesn't always last, or like it's a special preview because their album's about to come out. So you can get like 3 songs. So
gotcha.
It kind of just depends, but, yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. This was really fascinating and I'm so glad we've connected. And
me too. Thank you so much. I'm so glad we can nerd out about the same things and totally think the same about these things.
We do. We need to have more conversations, I think, in the future about this, whether that's, podcast or some other way collaboration, because we're very much the same in a lot of these ways. But
yeah, and I feel like we touched on a lot of topics that you could have a whole conversation about because they're just such deep things that are really going on.
If there are things you want to go deeper on, you can leave that in the comments also, so we can know what else we should hit on. So
absolutely.
Okay, so if you were in one camp before listening to this interview, if you were in an indie camp or you were in the traditional publishing camp where you would never publish independently, I'd love to hear from you in the show notes and just kind of let me know where you're at with all of this. And if this interview was enlightening in any way, if it made you more sure you want to get a traditional deal with your books, or if you are still firmly in the indie camp, I want to know. So head over to the show notes, creativewriting.com/040, where you can leave a comment and read my thoughts from the interview and the things that I took away from it, and also find Maria at Cooks and Books so that you can check out her blog, which is really beautiful and a lovely, lovely blog that deals with writing and food. One last thing before you go, I do want to remind you, I haven't mentioned this in a long time, about the free email course, which is a totally free course that I've created that will help you navigate your email list. And that's just at freeemailcourse.com. Pretty easy to remember. And if you're interested in email too and you get through the course and you want more, you can pre-order my book, Email Lists Made Easy for Writers and Bloggers. And I hope it will do just what the name says. It'll make it easy for you. So thanks so much for listening, and I hope you have an inspired week.